Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about functional programming. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Hi Frederick, I've taken an interest in functional programming and also have opened my mind towards test-driven development. So far while learning, a question that has occurred to me is if you're going to really buy into and move forward with test-driven development, then functional programming and even uh, further a functional programming first language such as Haskell, Clojure, F Sharp, wouldn't they seem to be a far more natural fit for this way of developing than other paradigms? And yet, and or maybe it's just me, thus far I've largely seen that test-driven development is discussed in the context of Java or other OOP languages. Am I way off on this? What am I missing? I hope my question is clear enough. Thank you. So, my interpretation of your question is why is it that you find that most of the test stream development discussions are going on in Java and OOP languages as opposed of say in Haskell, Clojure, and F Sharp, which are functional languages where you feel that the functional style of working would be a very good fit for test-driven development. So what you're touching on there is something that I think is very fun. Well, it has pros and it has cons, and I think it's the one of the most important things that you can learn to navigate in order to understand software development as a more holistic thing. And the thing that you're seeing is language culture. And this is something that I find fascinating because it exists in absolutely anything. Whatever it is that we humans decide to do, you will always find that if we can just agree, usually the way it starts is that we all agree on some construct. Say it might be a religion, it might be a politics or ideologies, a way of doing work. In this case, software development. We agree on something, and then someone comes along and says that, hey, we've been doing this for a long time now, and I've figured these are the learnings that I have gotten, and I feel like we should move in this direction, or our community should move in this direction. And depending on a set of very complicated factors, you either create a new offshoot branch of like that value system, or you continue the way you are. There's more complexities to it than that, of course. But that is basically what you're seeing now. What you're seeing is that the idea of test-driven development is actually more prominent in some languages than in others. An example would be it is only in recent time, and I think that still it's almost a joke today, to say that you're going to do test-driven development in front end. Not because it's a bad idea. It's a really good idea. It's just not part of the culture. You are practically not expecting anybody to do test-driven development in the front-end code base. Even though the tools are there, there's really nothing stopping you from doing it. I still see continuously things such as tests and test-driven development not be adopted as part of the front-end community, or at least not as an accepted standard. In Java, it's very different. There's a large emphasis on the TDD mindset and so forth. Then we can of course discuss what people are saying and what they're doing, which is a different thing. But this exists in absolutely every community that you will find, and it really comes down to a fairly complicated combination of value system and history and value development and of course language development. When we depending on the community, you will, as I was saying, you will see that different things matter more or less. My favorite one is domain-driven design. So domain-driven design is not, it may be something that you have heard about and may be something that you haven't heard about. Even though it's probably one of the most established ways of doing enterprise development, you may have missed it, and it's not your fault necessarily. It is, depending on your community, going to be something that you organically get exposed to, or it might be something that you're not going to be exposed to. And the same thing goes for practically everything that you do in software development. Some tools and some concepts are more established in one language or one stack than in others. And I think that this is something that you will learn. Like, you will never learn this if you just stay on one stack. Never. Like, this is something you will only understand if you really do look around a bit. I'm not saying that that's something that you have to do. I'm just saying that uh, I think that if you want to be the best programmer that you can possibly be, you have to understand, as I was saying, the culture of the different languages and their value system. It's, as I said, very similar to understanding different religions, and I'm not even just talking about the main ones. I'm talking about like these tiny little churches and values and so forth. It really comes down to understanding people, history, and culture to really figure out why one in this case programming language, even though it might be TDD might make a lot of sense in a programming language such as Haskell and so forth. Why is it that you don't see as many tech talks about it? Well, it might not be that because it's a bad idea. It might be because there are other things that are more popular to discuss in that community than in other areas. And the same thing goes for all the languages. All the languages have like this little, I mean, they have their own trends, their own interest, and the things that are in the public eye, if that makes sense. Just as in politics, social media, whatever, we can't talk about everything that might be something cool or something that might be a good idea. So, but we talk about certain things over other things. And here's the thing that you've heard me say 100 times before. I hope. Well, I don't hope that, because it would be really sad if I've said it that many times. This is why I say you have to understand the problem you are solving. What I mean by that, the essence of what that is to understand what are you trying to achieve with your programming language, because your programming language and the tools that you have, they're just an expression or a means to an end. It's something that you're using to meet some end goal. So if your community doesn't really favor or really talk about something, that is actually a really good idea. You, as a master developer, will understand that it doesn't really matter what your community is saying. It doesn't matter what is trendy or hip. A good idea, there's only ever ideas, and these ideas, they can be good and they can be bad. And if you really want to make good decisions and understand what to do and what not to do, what is going to be a good solution and what's going to be a bad solution, you have to understand a bigger perspective than just the tools that your community is popularizing at the moment. If you want to have an extreme example of that, look at the front-end community, or say JavaScript land. You have so many options of what you could pick that it's actually a problem. And I promise you, most of the people who are dealing with this mess don't really know like they are just listening to each other, which is a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you don't know how to make a good decision regardless of what your community is hyping at the moment, then that is the thing that you should really try to learn. Because just as I was saying, just if you have found that not that many people are talking about test-driven development in, say, Haskell, well, that doesn't mean that you have to ignore it. It might be you should, if that is an issue that, and you see that there's a big value in adopting this work practice in your own workflow, then do it. Like, literally do it, because that's that should be your focus. You should understand the value that something like TDD might bring to the table and adopt it, not because someone told you in your community to do it, but because you have understood the problem that you are dealing with and that this thing is a good solution to that problem. So, what I want you to take away from this is that language culture makes up a big part of the IT politics, and why you hear about certain things, and like why, say, something like microservices is a lot more popular to talk about than something else, or why, say, Golang is a very popular language versus some other language. It doesn't really matter what you pick. There's always a trend somewhere going on, guys. And that's why I urge you, if you want to be really, really good at software development, when you get to be a little bit older and you get to be a little bit more senior, you will start to realize that the best thing for you is to focus on the problem that you're solving, and look at all of these things that you're seeing around you as just suggestions of different ways of doing something, and then get informed enough to understand what a good idea looks like and what a bad idea looks like. It doesn't matter if that bad idea is like the most popular thing in the world. if it is a bad idea, it is a bad idea. It doesn't matter if everybody else says that it's a good idea. And vice versa, if nobody's talking about this thing that might really help your company out or your work process out, fuck them. Make the choice yourself and say, hey, this I actually know is going to make a difference. So if you find that nobody's doing, say, test-driven development as part of your community, then the question is the community right, or is it just that they have other things that they're talking about that is more in the public eye than the thing that you are looking at? That's something that you have to figure out for yourself. But I just tell you this: learn how to understand the problem that you are solving, and you will start to see that different communities, like, there's so much going on, and there's so many ideas for how to solve different problems. And if a good solution to a problem in your community isn't really going on in your community, but it's somewhere else, then learn from that community and take the ideas from the other communities into your own workflow. Have a great day.